All right. Thanks, Nick. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Right then. So before I pass over to Jem, who'll take you through a bit more of the interview process and what to expect post-interview, I'll talk a little bit of my experience as a recruiting manager. Um, so first off, I'll go with shortlisting. So earlier on, you recall the slide where I gave you the shortlisting criteria you can see in the person's specification as part of the application. So these are repeated on our online systems. So shortlisting is a blind process. So it's important to note here that there's no personal identifiable information which is passed on to the recruitment team. So all we will actually see is your education and employment history, as well as any supporting information. So there are no names or ethnicity or any other personal identifiable information in line with the Equality Act for fair recruitment. Okay. And every application is given an anonymous identification number. So if you ever don't get past the shortlisting phase and you send an email to the recruiter asking, can you let me know what feedback I had? If your name's Bob Bobson, I'm not going to know what application was yours. You'll need to let me know your identification number so I can maybe have a look at your shortlisting or your application and give you some bespoke feedback on why you didn't hit the shortlisting criteria. So this is a shortlisting criteria from a biomedical scientist within histopathology, an advanced histological dissector. This is someone who's been trained up generally to take over from a medical consultant in the dissection suite for any of you that are familiar with cellular pathology techniques. And what we do is we give each of these criteria a score. So here you've got 2. So 0 would be you don't have the diploma. 0, sorry, that was 0. 1 is you have the diploma but are working towards it. And 2 is you've actually got it within that specialty. And every shortlist will be marking exactly the same. So it's just a set of marking criteria, which you should be familiar with through university and all your assessments. Okay, so we go through those, give every bits of these a score. So this is why it's really important to read through the job description and the job specification when writing those applications. So when Nick was asking you before around what score would you give them, this is often what we have as recruiters in the background. It's just to let you know how you get through to the interview stage. Okay. So from there, often here, I see you got a score of what's that, 16, 20, 28 maximum score. We may set a score for interview around 20. So you've got to score 20 out of the 28 to actually get an interview with us, which means you probably hit the majority of all of these and possibly some of the desirable criteria. And these can be interchangeable. Okay. Again, if I'm asking for experience of things like clinical audit, I'd want to see a clinical audit of where you've actually participated or worked towards one. Or if you've done any teaching and training of healthcare scientists or medical staff, even if you haven't done it, what have you observed? What maybe you've done? So again, bringing forward those transferable skills, which might mean you get at least a score of 1, but maybe not the full 2. Okay. So the interview is normally held in a typical format. There'll be introductions from the interview panel. There's at least 2 interviewers. It can be up to 4 or 5, or when I was interviewed for my last job, there was 7 people on my panel plus a peer assessment group as well of 30 individuals in the room asking me questions afterwards based on a clinical scenario. But don't worry, for a band 5 entry-level biomedical scientist, it tends to be 2 to 3 individuals, usually the lab manager, a senior member of staff, and sometimes somebody within that tier. So maybe another biomedical scientist that will be working in the laboratory who deals with the day-to-day. Okay. And as part of that, you must remember that during the introductions, we're assessing you on your first impressions as well. Okay. There'll be a series of questions, and these are linked to the key responsibilities as listed in the job description. Okay. They may be scenario based. So if it is a histology job, and say we put in for a band 6, so typically a specialist biomedical scientist, someone who's been practicing for a couple of years, or it might be on an Annex 21. So we're looking for a trainee to train up to that level. Okay. We may be asking some specific questions. So something around maybe internal quality control linked to that. So maybe something around the Westgard rules and Levi-Jennings charts within biochemistry. Might be something to do with how to troubleshoot staining within histopathology or cytology. Okay. And the goal is often to evaluate both those hard and soft skills that Nick's talked to you already about. The other thing is we're often asking questions around our organizational goals and values. So it really is key that you actually look at the website and see what they have. So at Derby, we have, there used to be the Pride principles. They've been replaced by CO now as well. So compassion, openness, and equity. And so the questions are often based around those as well. Sometimes, depending on the actual job, there may be a practical activity or presentation. So when you do get invited for interview, if there are any specialist considerations, do look at the email and make sure that if they've asked you to bring along your registration portfolio, bring it along. I acknowledge now that most candidates don't have a reg portfolio for a band 5, so I will always ask myself to look at the portfolio to see how far along you are. So if we are going to offer you the position at the end of the interview process, at least I know how much it will take us to invest in your training and support to onboard you, to get your HCPC registration, before we can really start letting the training wheels off and pushing forward with your training. Okay. The important thing is to know is that each question is the same for every candidate. Often what will happen is you'll notice that you get probing questions. This happens if you haven't answered the question fully, or there might be some ambiguity to your answer and you may have just touched on the actual answer we're looking for. So it tries to be a bit of a natural conversation. Okay. You will notice that candidates will often have interviewers, will have a pen and paper with us, and we are writing down what you've said. So we have a true reflection of what was said during the interview. And we apply an objective scoring system. Okay, so have you answered this question fully? Not at all, and in between. Okay, so at Derby, we tend to apply scores between 1 and 5. Okay, and as always, at the end of the interview, there is an opportunity for applicant to ask questions. And as a recruiter, please always have something in mind. It's something that you've researched about the department. So ask what a daily life would be for you in our department. Ask about training opportunities, anything that shows your commitment to the department. If you walk away and say, no, I'm absolutely fine, it tells us that maybe your heart isn't in it with us. You've probably got another 5 or 6 interviews lined up. Okay. So general tips for shortlisting, and don't worry, this presentation is being recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel in due course. But if we ask you for that registration number, please do provide it. List your qualification and employment history in reverse order, so always the most recent first. If you have any gaps in employment, please state the reasons. Okay. You need to demonstrate your suitability for the role as per that person's specification. That's how we're shortlisting you and getting you to interview in the first place. And also, as Nick and I keep mentioning, is look at those trust values and reflect on how they align to your own. Okay. Check your spelling and grammar. I've specifically done that incorrectly on here to prove my point. At the end of the day, you will be producing results that are available in the public domain, and they have to be produced without any issue or any ambiguity. So it's really important that that's part of the test, is to actually make sure that when you are applying that you can use grammar, you can spell correctly, so that if you do have to issue a report and something's going out to a patient or to a clinician, there's absolutely no problem misinterpreting that information. Okay. Please answer this question set. So if we ask you for GCSEs in English, maths and science, please state it. Don't just fall into the pitch trap that many candidates do, which is where they'll just put on their degree, making the assumption that, well, I've had to have done my GCSEs and A levels. If we ask you specifically for those, please answer that question in a way that is us checking that you can follow a simple instruction. So can you follow a standard operating procedure? Do you plan to arrive for your interview early? Again, first impressions speak a lot. If you're going to be late for your interview, what does that say about your potential career moving forward? And also be aware of your own limitations. You will often get asked a question on, have you got any developmental, any weaknesses, is a question that used to be asked. It's phrased slightly differently now to tell us about any developmental issues you may have found along your career journey. And it's important to be honest and say, rather than saying, well, I have an issue with timekeeping, it might be I've had this issue where I noticed that I was having problems meeting targets in the lab and deadlines. However, what I've done is I break those down into short, manageable segments, and this is what I do. So show how you're working to correct that potential weakness, okay? And again, is just to reiterate, is from what Nick said, is don't use a standard application. Please don't forget to check your application, especially if you use ChatGPT to help you formulate those applications. I have seen applications recently where people have put in, please can you review this job specification and tell me where I'm going wrong in applying for jobs. And that was copied and pasted straight into the application. And not only that, they've been applying for jobs in haematology, not histology. So again, it's being that specific. Don't use a standard application. The other thing as part of the interview process is don't go straight into answering a question. Often we'll ask long questions. You can relay that information back to us. You can take a deep breath, answer in bits. If you don't think you've asked the full question, ask and repeat the question. Don't just jump straight in. We want to see a candidate that will take a breath, have a little think about it, and then answer what we've asked. Okay, please don't lie and be authentic. Don't overtalk and try and fill a silence. And don't worry if you feel nervous. It's okay to feel nervous. You are on show. You're trying to make the best of yourself. Just take those deep breaths and just approach it, and just keep asking us to repeat or rephrase the question if you do forget. Okay. Don't forget a good body manner, a good manner and body language. Don't be too colloquial. Don't crack too many jokes. It will show potential unprofessionalism. And, you know, sit nice and straight in your chair, straight back and shoulders. Don't sort of slouch. I've seen candidates manspreading and all sorts in interviews, and it just doesn't set off a very good impression of the individual. And also, if you have had a previous negative experience with an employer or a team, don't be too negative. Talk about the positive that you took from that experience. Okay. So in terms of interview tips, it's really important to think about STAR. Okay, so situation, task, action, and result. Okay, so when we give you a question, so for example, this is a conflict, a question I often ask is, give me an example of when you faced conflict at work and how did you handle it? So break this question down in terms of situation. So you want to describe the context of the conflict. Briefly explain the background, including when and where it occurred and who was involved, being specific and providing enough detail for the interviewer to understand the situation. Okay, so in this case, you're working on a group project at university where one member of the team was not contributing or delivering in their delegated actions. So what was the task? So this is where you explain your role in the conflict and what you were trying to achieve. What was your goal in resolving the situation? So you were the group team leader and you wanted to ensure everyone received a good result. This is great. Okay, you're looking at the whole team. So the action, what did you do? Detail the specific steps that you took to address the conflict. So be sure to highlight your actions and the reasoning behind them, focusing on how you communicated, listened, and collaborated with all others involved. So you may have spoken to the team member away from the main group, so don't put them on the spot. Nobody likes a witch hunt. You asked open questions. How were they? Are there any problems with the task that they're not understanding? Do they have anything in their personal life that might be impacting their ability to contribute to the project? Be mindful of your own body language and tone. So how did you ensure that conversation went well? Did you use those open questions? You avoided accusations. Also signposting to any additional support. And the result is where you explain the outcome of your action. So what was the final result of this conflict and how was it resolved? What did you learn from the experience? This is where you can now start to expand. You can expand, and you really need to emphasize the positive impact of your actions, such as improved communication, stronger relationships within the team, and a more productive work environment. Okay, so that's all detailed here. Okay,